Hi, Melissa. Thanks for doing that solo episode last week.
Oh, hi, Julie. I missed you. It's really good to be back in the room with you. I
Likewise.
really enjoyed listening to the interview you did with Alicia Brignall while I was out.
Yes.
And you and I just sort of leapfrogged each other.
Yeah. Well, last week was really memorable for me. I suddenly had to leave town because the mother of one of my best friends from high school died. And this mother provided for me in high school a place that felt like a second home while my parents were getting a divorce. And her home was especially cozy. She and her husband built it from scratch. He was a construction contractor, and she was a very gifted sort of visionary for what a space should look like. So, for instance, their living room was a pit. You went down 2 steps, and then all of the couch was built into this cozy nook.
Cool.
With these big bay windows, and there would be a fireplace and a television. We used to watch the television series called MASH, which some of you may know. She had, to me, the first kitchen island I ever saw in the 1970s. They didn't exist yet. They built one, and their house was in this sort of angular shape. And so the island actually followed the shape of the room. It was massive. It was made from a massive tree. And she used to welcome her daughter and her daughter's friends into the kitchen, and we'd help make spaghetti sauce from scratch. I still remember smashing the garlic and smashing all of the tomatoes. And this maybe isn't as kosher, but it is what she did. She'd give us these little like thimblefuls of red wine to drink while we were making spaghetti, because that was required if you were a good spaghetti maker. And they had these very raucous dinners with a lot of enthusiasm. She had a room dedicated to sewing. My best friend's bed hung from the ceiling. So when you slept on it, it gently swung you to sleep. Like, this was just an incredible house. And it had all the feels of coziness and family. And so when I eventually did become this home educating person, like, I wanted dance dishes, I wanted cloth napkins, I wanted fresh flowers on my table. You know, my friend Dottie, who I wrote about in The Brave Learner, she was like the person who really inspired me with learning. But it was Duffy, my friend's mother, who gave me a vision of what it would feel like to make the home a place people want to be. And so that was the memorial service I went to this week. And I was reminded again of that legacy. And of course, I'm at my stage of life, and you are too, where legacy starts to mean something to you. And you think, well, what am I passing on? And here this mom passed that on to me. And I've gotten to participate in creating that for my own family, but then even passing it on to the homeschoolers that listen to this podcast, read my books.
Right.
And so, Melissa, as we get started today, I'm thinking about what are those values that you and I really wanted to leave behind here in the homeschooling environment, you as you wind up your time and mine already being behind me. What are the things we hope don't get lost that you get to pass on?
Oh, I love this question. I love thinking about this. When you're telling that story, when you were describing that environment that had such an impact on you, you reminded me of the best compliment I ever got about my house. From 2002 to 2006, I lived in Crozet, Virginia, so a little town outside Charlottesville, Virginia. And we were in a neighborhood where, gosh, everybody just like, they were these amazing decorators. And boy, were we not there at that stage of our lives. But it was a house like full of little kids homeschooling. And
Right.
a friend came in one time, and her kids went to the Waldorf school in town. And she walked in and she said, "You know what I love about your house? Your whole house feels like a Waldorf kindergarten."
That is a fabulous compliment. Oh my gosh.
I was so happy. That like atmosphere was so important. Like the cultivation of the atmosphere of the home was so important to us. And I know that it was like we were thinking of that as baby homeschoolers from the
That's
get-go
right.
because of Charlotte Mason.
Yes.
And I know that a lot of like today's homeschoolers haven't really read Charlotte Mason, this British educator who was writing like in the late 1800s and early 1900s. And I can see why, obviously, why, she's not in the mainstream. And I've never been a total Charlotte Mason method person. I've been Charlotte Mason inspired
Same.
in so many ways. She informed my way of thinking about what is education from the time that my oldest was a baby. I was reading those books, when I was a brand new mom. And one of the things that she would say is education is a discipline, an atmosphere, and a life.
It was in this order. Charlotte Mason said, education is an atmosphere, a discipline, and a life. And the reason I want to emphasize that is that we sometimes forget the importance of atmosphere. And in this social media moment where you and I were discussing right before we hopped on, we sometimes think atmosphere is home decor, but that is not what it is. It is an invitation. The atmosphere has to have an invitational quality. What I loved about my friend's house is I felt invited to participate in cooking, invited to experience sleeping in this interesting bed, invited to handle material and sew, invited to set a gorgeous table and make it interesting for dinner. In my house growing up, which was a beautiful home, by the way, and had been interior decorated, so it looked good. That is not the feel. The feel was, this is a beautiful home. There is a difference between a house where you feel invited to participate and a home that looks really pretty. And I think when you say that someone told you your house was like a Waldorf home, what they're actually pointing to is that there's a lot of stuff to do in there.
Right.
And that was kind of my goal with my kids. I used to say to myself, it is worth painting this wall yellow because it will change how we feel in this room. And then it sets the stage for all the things that we will do, right? It highlights, you paint a wall yellow and it highlights the painting that's in the blue frame and makes you see it in a different way. I'm going to invest in tea things because when we have tea with poetry, poetry becomes interesting. I'm going to invest in these bins that are really adorable from IKEA because they're going to house the blocks, the Playmobiles, the Hearthsong dolls, and make them easily accessible, right? I'm going to invest in a table for art supplies so that they are out all the time and my kids can do art. An atmosphere in the Charlotte Mason way of thinking and in the way you and I homeschooled is invitation to participate, not just beautiful to look at.
I love emphasizing that word invitation. I love that you framed it that way because that is exactly it. Like I always wanted it to feel everything accessible.
Yes.
Baskets of toys and art supplies accessible, right? Like I know you and I were both there from the get-go. For me, so much of my early formation had to do with my oldest daughter having leukemia as a 2-year-old and spending like from age 2 and 3 not really being able to be around other kids. I mean, the whole of her, second year, we were in the hospital, but then we're out. She's 2.5, 3 years old, and we couldn't go to the playground. She's still on chemo for the next 2 years. And we're in a little apartment, and we had to try and make an atmosphere, even before I was framing it in that language, be a place I wanted it to feel cozy and magical and full of good stuff to do. And I know that spilled over so that when I was reading Charlotte Mason's thinking about education is an atmosphere, it exactly tied into what I was already trying to do with this sort of rich, abundant, but not abundant in material goods necessarily. It was abundant in togetherness and experience and relationship. I think today we would use the word vibe. Like it was the vibe I was trying to create and have all along. And
love that.
I've been thinking about this so much, Julie, because that vibe was infused with joy. And I would say, I mean, there was a point like at the heyday of blogging in whatever, 2008, 9, 10, joy was like this dominant characteristic of what I was trying to think about and talk about and live. How do I cultivate a spirit of joyfulness for us, even when we're going through some really difficult stuff? And we went through some really difficult stuff. Going back to that hospital experience of, well, she's 2 years old and she's living in the hospital. I don't want her life to be miserable. I want there to be joy infused in the experience. That got into my DNA as a homeschooling mom. And I feel like when I see homeschooling online, I'm not always seeing that sense. Like, I want people to feel that joy, and I'm not sure that they are.
It's such a great question, and I would be interested to hear back from those of you who are listening. I was thinking recently that sometimes there's a difference between the way we define happiness and joy. And in homeschool, I think we think we'll feel happy if our kids get things done, if we satisfy a requirement, if we accomplish a goal. That's like this sense of satisfaction that we associate with happiness. Like, I planned a meal, I made the meal, we ate the meal, I'm happy with tonight's meal, right? So there's a little bit of that happens in homeschooling. I set the agenda, I found the curriculum, the child executed it, we're doing well. That makes me happy and satisfied. But joy is kind of this other thing. Joy is, in this case, in my view, could be, sometimes from like a Christian tradition, you sort of have like, joy almost being the thing that you call it when you suffer and don't complain, right? Like there's also that one. That's not what I'm talking about. But what we're really talking about is this infusion of enchantment, which is what I wrote about in my book, The Brave Learner. It's this idea that we can sort of put some pixie dust across the experience of learning. So when I think of the atmosphere that Charlotte was going for, it's not that it's pretty. It can look really messy, actually. So don't feel too badly if your house is disorderly.
For sure.
It is an invitation to participate in the joy of learning. The joy of learning is experienced on an individual level. It is not about outcomes. It is about immersion in a process. It is the feeling that this process is worth my energy. That's where that joy comes from. And the reason that I love Charlotte Mason's quote, that it's an atmosphere, a discipline, and a life, is that some homeschooling philosophies seem to stop before the word discipline. Like, they're kind of afraid of the idea of any kind of structured learning. And you and I both know this, and I want to talk about it a little with you because you brought it up earlier, and I find it fascinating. When we were coming up through the ranks, there was a lot of debate between like classical education and unschooling, two ends of a spectrum of how we approach learning. On the one hand, there's this like disciplined approach, right? You're going to follow a certain set of books, a certain history cycle, a certain amount of math. You're going to organize it into a structure. People are going to perform it. It's going to be rich and meaningful, but it's really intentional schooling, right? It's very intentional. But then on the flip side, you have this unschooling side, which was suspicious of curricula, afraid of organizing a schedule, fully child-led, oriented towards the idea that curiosity is the primary and maybe even only driver of learning. And so the parent's role in these two different systems was wildly different. And one of the reasons I found Charlotte so interesting is I felt like she struck a balance there. But before we go to that, Melissa, share a little bit about your memory of that continuum between like classical education and unschooling back when we were coming through the ranks.
I would say that watching what the word unschooling means to people has been one of my nerdy interests for these last, 25 years?
Oh my God, that's so true.
Because the word itself originally was how John Holt talked about like a life where your kids didn't go to school, like what learning was like in this other context. And it overlapped with the word homeschooling. So there was definitely some people, thinking of homeschooling as I'm getting a curriculum from someone and I'm following a sequence of instructions, and that's what we do each day. And then this broader definition of like, there's so many ways to learn and there's so many things to learn about, and we're going to tap into all the different ways to learn. We're not closing doors. Maybe we'll take a class in this. And maybe we will use a textbook for this because that just feels like the most efficient way to get something under your belt. And then these other things are going to be more experiential, or we're going to learn from, doing deep dives and reading books on a subject, all of these different ways. But in the mid to late 90s, on the AOL home education discussion boards, there were all these, moms, largely. There were very few dads in the room discussing what homeschooling was. And it was this broader definition of unschooling up to a point. And then I started to see it shift to what is now considered radical unschooling, which is that totally child-led, no coercion involved type. And then, so by the time I'm homeschooling my children, I found myself kind of between two worlds. I was too structured for the unschoolers because unschooling was now sort of radical unschooling, but I was too unschooly for the really structured homeschoolers. I didn't fit into those boxes, and I had to do a lot of thinking and reading and iterating to figure out oh, okay, I don't have to be in a box. I want that broader definition of this life that is open to us with learning in all these different ways. And I did see frustrations arising for parents who radical unschooling did take on some almost dogmatic tendencies with what it says you can and can't do, what you are and are not allowed to do to be a quote, quote, good radical unschooling parent. And some irony there of a lot of rules for the parents.
Well, yeah. And in fact, I think one of the interesting sort of developments during that era is that people really were trying to sort themselves, almost like sorting hats in Harry Potter, right? Like,
yes.
I'm this kind of homeschooler, I'm that kind. And then it's almost like reading your horoscope or your Enneagram type. You're like, oh, and here are the categories that define me. Here are the characteristics that will show you who I am. And yet today, as we're moving into this new era, what I'm seeing is a loss of even awareness of some of those roots. So what I see sometimes, correct me if you think I'm wrong, I sometimes see people really wanting the outcome of natural learning, of curiosity-driven learning, of following a course of study and successfully enjoying it. I get a lot of feedback from parents saying, I just can't get my kid to want to do X. That is probably the most common comment I get from parents. And where I feel like you and I maybe at times defined ourselves against some of these more strident structures, we were at least engaged in definition seeking. We were trying to imagine what are the activities or the structures that support learning in my family. And today, I think we're all, you mentioned something I want you to talk about. It's this attention deficit trait. You mentioned this to me before we started. I think we're all really exhausted. I don't know if parents are even reading my entire book or pulling out Charlotte Mason's, what is it, 8-book, 6-book series, which is also very meandering and not super well written, even though it's wonderful. How much time are people devoting to sort of exploring and experimenting with a variety of methodologies to find their own sweet spot? It feels like everyone is in this rush to solve the problem tomorrow for all their kids in every subject without there ever being another problem. Am I misreading that?
No, I think that is, a feeling that I'm perceiving, especially on social media where people are sharing these goals, these ideals, and then these frustrations. People just seem tired and stressed. You earlier talked about education for you, and certainly for me, for my family, being about the joy of learning, not about outcomes.
Right.
And obviously we are concerned, we care about outcomes for our children, but the magic of human existence, I think, is in that joy of learning and of making things and of doing things and of knowing things. That's where satisfaction is. That's where fulfillment and purpose lie. And it's not about what, for me as I want to homeschool my kids, I knew, well, it's not about GPA. It's not about, what boxes they can tick off. I think now parents today, younger parents, see that those, sort of promises of those other outcomes weren't fulfilled. So there's that disillusionment. So I do think that there's been a shift of even the ability to just think deeply about, like, what is education? Having the mental space, the capacity to detach from anything short form long enough to really read and think.
I want to jump in here because something you said about process I think is really important. So part of the dilemma of today's parent is that there are a lot of educational or academic promises being made by every system. Whether you sign up for a class, you join some kind of AI-sponsored educational platform, you join some learning community, and the promises are all about outcomes. But what actually creates joy is removing the pressure of the outcome. And the learning happens when we are invested, immersed, and absorbed in what we're doing. So when we talk about Charlotte Mason's atmosphere, discipline, and a life, I want to use an example that I think is a practical one. Imagine being interested in backyard birds. The atmosphere is you have a backyard. You decide to get a feeder to attract birds. You do a little research to find out what kind of bird seed is going to attract which birds, and that's the one you buy. You have now set up an atmosphere that welcomes the possibility of bird watching. You have a field guide, you might have some binoculars, but the atmosphere is just like setting the stage. It's not the activity, it's just creating the possibility. The next step is the discipline. The discipline might be, in our case, we signed up with the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. And by the way, I did a Monday morning meeting on my Substack about this topic just, I think, last week or 2 weeks ago. So we'll put a link to that in the show notes. But here's the thing. The discipline in our case was 2 days a week. We wrote down what birds we saw. We didn't do it every day. It wasn't an hour a day. It certainly wasn't a worksheet. We were checking off boxes of which birds we saw. Done. We'll never care if we see a cardinal again because we already saw one. We were actually actively engaged in looking at these birds, and we chose 2 days a week so we could report them to this special program called Backyard Feeder Watch that the Cornell Lab sponsors. So my kids, the discipline wasn't mastering the names of the birds. Because we were doing this routine of filling the feeders, noting them, and submitting our results, they were learning about birds. So what is the life part of this atmosphere, discipline, and life? All my kids know birds. My son Liam still comments on birds. For Christmas, I gave him Amy Tan's book about bird watching. It became a meaningful source of connection for Liam and me for sure, and then everybody else, enough that they still love it. And here's what's happening now. The first thing my grandkids do when they come to my house is fill the feeders, get out the field guides, and grab the binoculars. That's the atmosphere. They are not at the level of discipline yet. And so when we're looking at something like math, what is the atmosphere of math? Is it just a workbook? Is it just a work? Have you set the atmosphere before you expect the discipline? And if you don't set the atmosphere and only expect the discipline, is it any wonder that your kids hate it before you've even gotten going? And will it ever become a meaningful part of their lives? Or will they be like, oh gosh, so glad to be done with that math? The alternative is not, oh, my kid hates math, I'm never doing it until they show curiosity. You have to create an atmosphere where being interested in math is actually something that is sparked in them. That is your chief job. You know, when I wrote Help, My Kid Hates Writing, I wondered if people who were familiar with my work would feel like it was too familiar, that perhaps it wouldn't have the same impact as it would for people who didn't know anything about Brave Writer. But what I found out by reading the reviews is that even Brave Writer fans, even parents with kids who love writing, found new strategies and ideas within my book to help them be successful writing coaches. Here are some of the feedback that I've received, some of the reviews that I wanted to share with you. One reviewer said, "Another gem of a book by Julie. She always feels like an ally, not only for the home educators, but for the kiddos. This book has solid strategies to help soften the writing experience for kids with the guidance of parents who themselves may need a mental makeover in what writing even is or can be." Another reviewer said to me, "I can't say enough about how wonderful this book is. It's well written, which is good for this type of book, but it's also so useful. It makes it fun to write." And then maybe my favorite review said this book was heartfelt, insightful, actionable, and exactly what we needed. Julie challenges you to think in new ways and encourages you to be the guide your child needs on their language arts journey. Honestly, that was the motivation to write this book. I want you to feel that you can give your children the soft landing pad they deserve as they flex their wings of self-expression. I show you how. I give you great tips and strategies and lots of narrative examples. Check out my new book, Help My Kid Hates Writing. Go to juliebogartwriter.com or any place books are sold.
In unschooling, that's talked about as strewing the path.
Love it.
What kind of fun math activities or experiences, games, shopping, playing store, all of those things from the time they're tiny, math is in their world. It's part of the atmosphere of their lives. And Julie, I love your birding example. And when you were walking through it, it struck me that there's another aspect to the discipline piece. And that is you took the time to look for birds.
Yes.
So the filling of the feeders is part of the discipline, the maintaining them, but also there was a part of your day where that got your focus, that got your attention. And I've been thinking so much about attention lately and the role that it plays in this whole adventure of homeschooling. A little while ago, you said that I had been talking to you about this attention deficit trait. I'm so fascinated by this. It's something that's being studied right now. It's sort of the characteristics of it are very similar to ADHD. So all of us who are like, do I have ADHD? We may just have ADT, attention deficit trait. And that is meaning not the genetic sort of hardwired, your neurological condition. It's behavioral and it is reversible. Whereas ADHD, you have, and that's how your brain is, and you have that brain for your life, right? And there's lots of amazing things about having that particular brain. But ADT, I think it's like all the hard parts of ADHD without necessarily the magical parts of ADHD. It's difficulty focusing. It's just like difficulty being alone with your thoughts. It's difficulty detaching from this influx constantly. I mean, how often? I think nowadays, many of us, when we have some downtime, what do we do with our downtime? More mentally stimulating activities rather than staring out the window at birds, or we have to make ourselves do those things.
No, I love this because one of the things that I think is happening as a result of this sort of attention deficit idea is that we keep evaluating very short segments of attention for an outcome.
Yes.
Right? So we're sitting a child down and we're like, they need to finish this page. They get really frustrated that they didn't finish the page. And we're frustrated by the fact that they, quote, don't have a long enough attention span. But what we've never done is cultivate attention for that subject. We're like, have attention for something you don't care about, that's uninteresting to you, that doesn't relate to any other part of your life. Have attention for that.
Right.
But guess what? Kids can sustain attention even more than adults if the thing that they're paying attention to has been cultivated as meaningful to them.
If they care about it.
If they care about it. So 2 days ago, I was at a party, like an outdoor party at my daughter's house. And there were lots of little kids there. They had watercolors, mask making, Sculpey clay. I mean, is this not the daughter of a homeschool mom or what? This is all there for everybody to play with while we're at this party.
Right.
Incredible. And I'm watching these children. The oldest child was like 7 and the youngest was a baby. So, and there was a slew of them. There must have been 10. And I'm watching them actually sit down on a blanket painting. Then I watch them sit down, make masks, and wear them. Then I watch them play with this clay. And all I could think is, we're outside, we're away from devices, they're in community, there's a party atmosphere, there's no pressure to produce. So what's happening? They're completely engaged with the options. And I'm not saying they all sat there for an hour. It didn't take that long to make a mask, but they made the masks. They were asking for help. They wanted to do it. They wore them around. And so sometimes, like when we're talking about this again, the atmosphere, discipline, and a life, you really have to think through the context where you're asking your kids to sustain attention. And it was just fascinating. Part of the sustained attention of this experience was community. It was sort of the peer pressure of other people making masks.
Right.
They would come, they would start, then they would walk away, then they'd see someone finish theirs, they'd come back and want to finish theirs. Like, we have this idea that the correct way to learn is to sit quietly at a table, uninterrupted, start at the beginning, finish at the end, and present it to an authority figure. When really, what if it's like, well, it's an atmosphere of a party, there are opportunities to engage, multiple children, similar ages, they kind of go in and out of production. And of course, by the way, this whole party ended with a bonfire. Let me tell you, this is my favorite joke for all parents. If you want your kids off of a device, go start a fire in the backyard. They will leave in a minute.
Right.
And they will help you build this fire. These kids, for over an hour, were helping my boyfriend, Jim, keep a fire going. That was their whole goal. They kept adding to it. They were testing different things to see how they burned. That's learning, even though you can't quantify it.
You said no pressure to produce. And I think that is so important. I have this list here of the characteristics of attention deficit trait.
Perfect.
And I'm reading it and I'm thinking, this is why everybody's feeling the way they're feeling, Julie. This is like everyone I know right now.
Lay it on us.
ADT is characterized by a sense of panic and inner frenzy. Distractibility. I wish you all could see Julie. She's like already waving her hands in the air. Distractibility, stress, failure to concentrate or focus, impatience, obsessive desire for distractions to avoid the hard tasks, poor planning, failure to step back and refocus the perspective, and poor performance of tasks. Julie, that list, tell me, how can that list of things inform our homeschooling?
Here's what I'm hearing immediately. And actually, I'm going to add this to our conversation. I was talking with one of my friends who was telling me that the most meaningful advice that I gave her sister, who's a homeschooler, I was with them a few months ago. They have the cutest little nook. It's the best little homeschool space. And she was feeling stressed. You know, she's got a 5 or 6-year-old who needs to learn to read. She was feeling very stressed. And I said, you know what? You have a 5-year-old. Stop thinking about homeschooling. Go take up knitting. Just go get a hobby. And apparently this girl, this young woman was like, oh my gosh, I need a hobby. One of the things that will teach you everything you need to know about what we're talking about is engaging in an interest of your own, because you aren't in school. So you will not learn it the way school teaches you to learn.
That's right.
You will learn it in the way that learning actually occurs, which will tutor you in how to help your children learn. I want to share what's happening with me right now. I have decided that creative writing is important, not just writing for a business your entire life. I miss my creative writing. So I have been writing a couple hours a day. And I suddenly don't care about how many Instagram followers I have. I don't want to watch television. I couldn't care less about whether or not my pillows are plumped in my living room. I am obsessed, and there is no goal. I don't have a contract. I don't know what the outcome of all this writing will be, but I am immersed in a journey that is enlivening the person I am. For some of you, if you're Taylor Swift, that is sourdough bread right now. She literally said she is making sourdough bread to stop the thoughts that write songs. She needs a break. So her brain that is always writing songs only takes a break when she makes sourdough bread, right? Like, think about that. If you are obsessed with homeschooling, deflect from that and get good at making candles from beeswax. Get good at learning about ancient Rome. Find something that tutors you in the art of process learning so that you become in touch with those processes and out of this attention deficit trait.
That's right. And find something that allows you to experience hyperfocus and a flow state, because that is what our brains are craving.
Yes.
And that deep flow is so satisfying.
It is.
We've all felt it when we get just like really swept away by something that we're really enjoying doing. And you know what? Even as I say that, I'm walking back that statement. I can no longer take it for granted that we've all felt that.
Oh, wow.
I have felt it so many times in my life. I know that's where the exhilaration is for me.
Me too.
In that hyper-focused state, experiencing flow, because I'm learning something or doing something that is just so absorbing to me. But I do know that we now live in a world that offers up tab after tab after tab, video after video after video, post after post. And those things, it may occupy you for a long period of time. You may be, have a prolonged focus on them, but it's not the same thing as a flow state.
It's so interesting you bring that up. I was thinking while you were talking earlier about YouTube, I've often said that YouTube is proof that all human beings want to be teachers. Like, literally all I wanted to do was change the water filter in my refrigerator, and there were 200 different videos of nice people in their kitchens recording how to do that. I'm like, this is incredible. People love knowing something well enough that they can impart that skill to someone else. So be that person in your own life. Be the kind of person who is cultivating something that you know so well. It's fun to share it with other people. It's fun to feel like an expert. The favorite experience of all learners is expertise. That is a great feeling. And your kids can't get expertise if their life is divided up into 7 subjects a day, each 15 minutes, supervised by an adult. There have to be times of the day where they can get lost in what they're doing, whether that's doing face paints and dress-up clothes, or setting up a whole bunch of dominoes in a circle to see if you can knock them over, or building Lego, or drawing really carefully. Whatever that thing is, we tend to devalue stuff that doesn't fit neatly into the 5 school subjects. But I promise you, if you allow them time to become absorbed in something that doesn't look like a school subject, they will touch at least 2 and usually 3 to 5 of them in that play, right?
Yep. I'm really glad you said that about allowing the time. I used to bump into this when I was tutoring small groups of high school homeschoolers. At one point, I would often find, they would come in, like it was a reading and writing class, and they would come in and be so shamefaced because they hadn't done the writing. And then it would turn out that they were doing what I had told them was the first step toward writing, which was just giving yourself time to think, be doing something else and let your mind ruminate on the problem, the argument you're going to make. And their moms, and these were good, such well-intentioned moms, their moms would see someone who appeared to be doing nothing.
I see where this is going.
And would give them a task to do. And that goes back to the story I love to tell about when Scott was a comic book editor. One of his writers, who's this legendary comic book writer who's written like a million bajillion issues of Batman comics over the years and many others. At one point, his wife walked into the room and Chuck was laying on the couch, eyes closed. And his wife said, "Wait a second, I thought you said you couldn't go to the store with me because you were going to be working." And he said, "I am working." Because that's how he wrote. He would lay down and picture the scene in his head and then go to the computer and write it down.
That is so incredible. You know, one of the missing ingredients today, because screens are so plentiful, is playtime alone in a room.
Mm-hmm.
Just a child alone in a room. I remember having a little collection of these small, like glass and ceramic animals that I had. And I used to sit in a very tiny corner of my very small bedroom and make them play with each other. I imagined whole scenes. A lot of that has been lost because, first of all, we have these community spaces now. You know, we've got the great rooms and the kitchen that runs into the family room. We're a little afraid of kids being alone. We supervise them a lot. But if you have like the opportunity to let a child just spend time, right? Just spend time. You could give them the opportunity to take an animal for a walk or to walk in circles in the backyard. They might not like it at first because they're so not used to it. And so you can like grow that skill over time. You know, just take a lap around the backyard before we do our next thing. That could grow into 3 laps. It could grow into 5 laps and help them start to enjoy the company of their own imagination and their own minds. It's really an important part of learning. And one of the things I'm getting out of today's episode is maybe the real hindrance between pre-internet and post-internet homeschooling is that we used to have an abundance of time to actually just do like what we felt like doing and not constantly hold it up against somebody else's version or somebody else's steps.
Ooh, that comparison piece is a rough one.
It is.
I mean, we were definitely seeing that when it jumped from discussion groups to blogs, and there's photos now, that spirit of like competition, envy. I mean, I certainly experienced it.
Yeah.
I saw somebody's amazing shelves and I wanted those shelves or whatever it might be.
Yes.
And now it's intensified. It comes at you hard and heavy.
It does.
It's a lot.
And a lot of you, perhaps, I wouldn't say all of you by any means, but there's also a percentage that are turning social media into a source of revenue based on their homeschools. And so now you've got like this double pressure. You have to think like a content creator while you're trying to create content for your children's education. And those, I'll just say this right now, as someone who has to create content for a business, I find that very difficult to do both well, where I'm like devoting my energy towards producing something like a podcast or producing a piece of writing, and then also having to think about how to create, 30-second soundbite content that will gather followers. These are very strange times we're living in as home educators. And the more that you can give yourself permission, even if it's like alternating weeks or something, give yourself some space to not wear both hats at once and to experience the pleasure of being home with your children learning.
Right.
Whatever they're learning.
Right. Separate the camera lens from the experience.
Yes.
And that changes the experience, or the lens changes the experience.
Yes.
Always. I would say, too, a last thought that I have is if we're struggling with attention challenges and that sense of panic and inner frenzy.
Yes.
Right. That I do feel like I'm just seeing so much of it. When you try to dial back and give yourself the kind of space that we're talking about for thinking, for sitting alone with your thoughts, for experiencing some kind of hands-on activity, this goes for adults and children alike. The first few minutes of that experience, our brains often resist it.
Ugh.
And if we can just say, I know it's going to be hard for a couple of minutes, I'm going to keep going. There's that point where it clicks, it happens. Your brain gets past that hunger for the quick fix, and it starts to experience that longer term nourishment, and it loves it.
Yes.
And I have to tell you, I have to do it every single day of my writing life. I know the first few minutes are going to be, I describe it with the word almost torture, and I know that's an exaggeration and not a great one, but it feels a little bit like that because my brain wants to just jump off any exit ramp that it can find.
Yes. I 100% agree with that. In fact, that is one of the problems, I think, for our kids that we do not acknowledge out loud, but we could narrate that.
Yes.
They could sit down, you see them getting restless, and you could say, does your mind feel like jumping on an exit ramp right now? And then just by naming it, you've already disempowered it a little bit.
Yes.
And then you can say, okay, I'm going to set the timer for 30 seconds and we're going to see if you can sustain attention for 30 seconds. Now we're going to try a minute. Build it up as a skill. Acknowledge that it's a challenge. That's the word discipline right there. Discipline is simply a plan. It doesn't mean being in the military. Just means
Right.
plan, right? You've set
Right.
the atmosphere. Now you have a plan. I said today on a reel on Instagram, 2 minutes a week for your writing program. 2 minutes. Everybody has 2 minutes. Everybody sit down, free write for 2 minutes. Do that every week until that becomes a habit, a discipline. But it's not a discipline like you are going to write a 5-paragraph essay in an hour without any mistakes and it better start. It's not that. It's learning to cultivate the habits that support the possibility of a child suddenly stumbling on an insight or a storyline, and now they're just off going. I got the most amazing feedback today from a mom who said, we were doing these little 2 and 3 minute free writes. And all of a sudden, my daughter now wants to write a 20 chapter book. And she's like on chapter 19 and she's like 11 because she has cultivated now like the process and joy of writing through these very tiny chunks. The discipline of it allowed it to kick over into this pleasure and true process of learning.
1 hour from now, when we finish this podcast, after I go take a walk, I'm going to sit down at my computer and here's what I have to do every day. Here's how I'm writing a novel. I say, okay, my head is not there today. Okay, I only have to work for 15 minutes. Only have to write for 15 minutes.
Love it.
Because the secret is if I write for 5 minutes, I'll write for an hour.
Yes.
And sometimes, and this is what homeschooling allows us to do for our kids so well. Sometimes I need someone to just sit in the room. So I will say to one of my kids or to my husband, please just come sit in this room with me for 5 minutes until I get started. And they'll see when it happens. And I've forgotten they're there. I've forgotten anyone's there. I am in Texas with the swimming pigs. And they can leave the room. And I'm off and running.
Those are great tricks. I'm going to give you one more because this is the one I use. I reread what I've already written and I read it out loud. This is for writing, but I mean, you could literally do this with math. You could go to the page they've already completed and let them admire the work they've already done. There is something for me about seeing that I was pretty good yesterday that makes me want to get back into it to see if I can do that again so I can admire myself tomorrow. Like that is kind of a little bit what flow state is like. You're starting to knit the sweater and you're like pulling it out of your little knitting bag and you're like, look at all the stuff I did yesterday. I can't wait to add to it, right? You have that moment of admiration for your achievements. Sometimes in homeschooling or even in traditional education, we're so busy compartmentalizing. There's never a moment of admiration. It's like, you got that done yesterday. The new mountain is in front of you. Climb it again. No, let's look at the pictures. You got to the top of the mountain. You planted the flag. The view was beautiful. Now we're going to start another mountain climb, right? Look what a good mountain climber you are. Like a little of that energy.
I literally have a chart on my wall where I put a gold star, like the kind we got in kindergarten, if I did my 15 minutes.
Okay, that's so beautiful. And you know what? Kids love that stuff. And we've kind of lost touch with it because we're so busy with the hearts and the thumbs up on our phones. But like anything tactile is such a beautiful thing. I was remembering when I was in junior high, I had a lollipop pen. Do you remember these?
Yes.
They were like a little skinny stick and it had a lollipop on top. And when you took it off, the ballpoint was there.
Yes.
And I wanted to keep a diary just so I could use the pen. Right? Like these things trick you into work. They trick you into doing. This is why I wrote my book. Enchanting the Education actually helps us over that hurdle. So we will do the discipline so that learning becomes a life. And I think that is today's episode, man. Atmosphere, discipline, and a life.
I love it.
I love it so much. Charlotte for us is like the midway between that high structure and unschooling.
Yes.
We love her.
We do. And it's worth
We are
noting.
Charlotte stans.
She always began with attention. So there we are. It's full circle to Charlotte.
Oh my gosh, truly. No, she did. And she believes that you should not exceed your attention span because it creates and nurtures bad habits. So we'll end on this because I love that we ended up back at attention. Charlotte basically says you tell a child, work while you are fully alert and giving your most excellent effort. And the moment you notice your attention wane or your effort becomes sloppy, stop. Because we never want to cultivate the habit of sloppy work because your attention failed. That's incredible to me. So these short lessons, they'll be short, but you can trust your kids because as they build that discipline of trial, they will lengthen their attention span. You can't lengthen it for them, but they can learn to lengthen it for themselves.
Julie, I really enjoyed this conversation.
You know, if you are listening to this and you're immediately thinking of your best friend on Voxer or WhatsApp, please send it to them. I am listening to this thinking, I want this to be in the hands of as many homeschooling parents as possible. We have one advertiser who loves us. We're not seeking a big platform. I am saying this from the sincerest part of my heart. These are the messages that this generation needs. We hear your cries. So please just quickly send it to a friend and then have a good conversation on Voxer with each other or WhatsApp.
That's right.
Right?
And let us know where we can help you infuse your experience with more joy.
Exactly, 100%. Thank you, Melissa. This was an amazing topic.
Thanks, Julie. Thanks, everybody.
Talk to you next week. Okay, that's another Brave Writer episode in the books. Thanks for joining Melissa and me today. We love it when you leave us reviews, when you send us comments via text message. We read them all. We also couldn't do this show without our fabulous production team at Nova or Jeanette Hall, the Brave Writer team member who handles all those administrative details you know nothing about. In the meantime, we hope that you have a fantastic week. Keep going. Think well. We're rooting for you.